What's up guys, my name is Tony and today I'm going to give you a quick and painless guide on installing Gentoo Linux. At the end of this guide you will no longer be allergic to the terminal and you will be ready to install Linux on your own hardware. Alright, the first thing we will do is download the Gentoo ISO. So we'll head over to gentoo.org and we'll go to the downloads page, and I will be using the minimal installation CD today. Alright, and the first step of the installation is to literally hit enter at this GRUB menu. And we will load the US key map by default here. And we are in the Gentoo Linux minimal installation CD. So I want to point you in the direction of the Gentoo installation wiki. I will be following along with this wiki today. It is a very well written wiki, so I will provide a link to it in the description of the video. Now, keep in mind this is a 2026 tutorial, so if you're watching this in 2027 or later, I highly recommend you load up the Gentoo Wiki because it might have slightly modified installation instructions. And without further ado, let's jump straight into the installation. So, the first order of business here is to explain the two shortcut keys that we described in the Arch installation guide, and that is Control-L to clear the terminal, and Control-C, which will quit commands. So the first thing we need to do is run ping gentoo.org to confirm the Ethernet connection is working. If you do not have an Ethernet connection available, I will provide a link for the iwctl command in the description. And let's utilize that Control-C command to quit out there. Alright, now we can clear the terminal and jump into partitioning the disks. And the guide recommends using fdisk, but I have learned throughout the years that cfdisk is a much nicer tool for partitioning disks. So we will go ahead and type cfdisk dev sda. For the label type, we are going to select GPT, just like in our installation of Arch, by the way, because this is a UEFI system. Now, in cfdisk, we will create 3 partitions. So first, we'll hit enter, and we'll type 1G, and hit enter again to create our 1 GB boot partition. Then we will go down and hit enter, and type 4G, and hit enter to create our 4 GB swap partition. This is important so that if our machine's RAM gets capped, it does not crash. And lastly, we'll just hit down and enter twice to create our root partition with the remaining disk space. Now, using the arrow keys, we'll navigate over to right, hit enter, we'll type yes to confirm, and we will hit enter on quit, and we will clear the terminal, and type lsblk to confirm that our partition scheme looks good, and as we see, it is all there. And now it is time to make the file systems. So we'll go ahead and clear the terminal. So we will type mkfs.ext4/dev/sda3, and that is going to be our root file system. And for our boot partition, we'll go ahead and type mkfs.fat-f32/dev/sda1. And for our swap partition, we will type mkswap/dev/sda2. And now it is time to mount these partitions. So if we note, the Gentoo guide suggests that we do mount it in the Gentoo directory that is inside MNT. So we will have to create that directory. So we will clear the terminal and we'll type mkdir-p for parent /mnt/gentoo. So we'll go ahead and type mount/dev/sda3/mnt/gentoo, and we'll type swap on/dev/sda2, and we'll head over to installing the stage file. And the most important part about this is to make sure the date is correct. So let's go ahead and type date. And we need to make sure this date is correct, otherwise later in the install process, we will run into issues. So for me, that is the correct date, so we can move on to the next step. So we will cd into our root partition, cd mnt gentoo, and now it is time to download our Gentoo tarball. and we are going to use this links command to do so. And we will type in links https://www.gentoo.org/downloads/mirrors. We'll hit enter here, and we'll go ahead and go down to the download section, and we see this stage 3 OpenRC 245 megabyte file. That's the one we're going to be downloading today, so we're just going to hit enter and save it. Give that a couple seconds. Alright, we can quit this by pressing Q and then enter. And to confirm we have that, let's just do a quick ls, and there it is. So to actually install this tarball, we're going to go ahead and run this command here. So let's type this command, tar xpvf stage, and I will use tab to autocomplete that. --xadders-include equals quote star.star quote --numeric owner, and we will go ahead and let that rip. Alright, it looks like it's done installing, and to confirm that, we'll type ls one more time. And as we see, we do have that Linux file system all set up here. Alright, this is probably the most important step of the installation, and that is to modify our make.conf flags. The unique thing about Gentoo is that it is a source-based distribution, which means you can have the option of compiling all of your programs from source, and with that, you are given the ability to change your make flags. For us, today we're only going to look at the use flags and the make opts. So let's jump into that make.conf file by typing vi/mnt/gentoo/etc portage make.conf. And let's navigate down to this line, and let's create a new line by typing O, and we will type make opts in all caps equals, and in here we can specify how many parallel compilations should occur when installing the package, and the wiki recommends taking the minimum number of either your RAM divided by 2 or the number of threads your CPU has. I have configured this machine to have 10 gigabytes of RAM and 5 CPU threads, so I'll be setting my J flag to 5. So we'll type -J5, quote. And for the best feature of Gentoo Use Flags, these are what tell your package manager how each package will be configured when they're installed. So for example, if you don't use Bluetooth, and you install a package with the -Bluetooth use flag, that program will not be installed with Bluetooth support. This is extremely helpful to reduce bloat. And today we're not going to go too crazy, but we will just add the following redactions to our use flags. So we'll type use equals quote -systemd, because we're using OpenRC today, -kde, -gnome, because we're not going to be using those desktop environments, and -Bluetooth. And we will hit escape:\wq to save and quit this file, and clear the terminal to move on to the Gentoo installation. Alright, I feel like I've said this 30 times in this video already, but we are actually finally going to install the Gentoo base system. In order to install the Gentoo base system, we first need to copy the DNS info by running this command. So we'll type cp-d reference/etc/resolve.conf, and we're going to copy that into /mnt/gentoo/etc. And next we need to mount the necessary file systems. Now this may seem tedious, but just follow along and write these commands exactly as they are laid out in the wiki. So we'll type mount --types proc/proc space mnt gentoo proc, mount --rbind -sys -mnt gentoo -sys, mount --make -rslave/mnt/gentoo/sys, mount --rbind/dev mnt gentoo dev, mount --make rslave/mnt/gentoo/dev, mount -bind/run/mnt/gentoo/run, and mount --make slave/mnt/gentoo/run. Beautiful. Alright, now it is time to chroot into the new environment. So we'll type chroot/mnt/gentoo/bin bash, and we will source etc profile, and we'll export ps1 equals quote ch space $ps1. And what that will do is give us a visual reminder that we are in the chroot environment. One last step before we let the base install rip is to mount our boot partition. So we're going to type mount/dev sda1 boot/UEFI. And that is very important for later on when we install GRUB. Now let's go ahead and sync our package manager by typing emerge-web rsync. Alright. That is synced up and ready to go. And let's select our profile. To list the profiles, go ahead and type eselect profile list pipe less. So as you can see, my profile is already set correctly to number 21 by the star here. So if you wanted to pick a different profile, let's say for example you wanted the systemd stable profile, what you would do is you would quit out of less by typing q, and you would type eselect profile set and the number of whatever profile you wanted. So in my case, I am going to keep it at number 21, so I'll set it to 21. And to confirm it's there, we would just type the eselect profile list one more time, and we do see that star on 21. So we'll quit out of that once again and clear the terminal. Now let's sync emerge with our profile. Emerge-sync-quiet. Alright, and I've said this about 30 times this video I feel like, but we're finally ready to install Gentoo. So let's update our world set by typing emerge-ask-verbose-update-deep-changed use at world. And we can let that rip. And it looks like it's just 19 packages here, so we'll hit enter on that to confirm. And this can take a very long time, so I'm gonna get some coffee and I will see you in a bit. Alright, that is complete and the coffee has been inhaled, so we can go ahead and ignore this PAM warning and clear the terminal. Okay, so since our world set is ready to go and we are going to have some text to edit in the next few steps, this is a mandatory thing, and that is to install Vim. So we're going to type emerge-q app editors/vim. Alright, Vim is officially installed, so we'll go ahead and clear the terminal, and we will move on to the time zone and configuring the locales. For the time zone, we just want to ensure our time zone is correct, so we'll use this command, ln-sf.user/share/zoneinfo. And for me, in my situation, I'm going to do America, Los Angeles/etc/local time. Moving on to the locale generation, we're going to vim/etc/locale.gen. And for my situation, and for most of you, we're going to go down to this NUS UTF-8 line and press X to remove that hashtag to get that uncommented, and type :WQ to write that file and quit. And we will clear that. And we will just type locale-gen. Once that's done, we have one more part of the locale equation, and that is to set our system-wide locale settings using the eselect command. So we will go ahead and type eselect locale list, and we see we do want number 4. So we'll type eselect locale set 4. Now we can run env-update and source etc profile and export ps1 equals quote ch $ps1. And the locale is complete. It is time to configure and install the Linux kernel. This is the part where we leave Richard Stallman's good graces and install the proprietary Linux firmware package. In order to do that, we are going to have to add a license to our portage package.license file by doing echo quote syskernel /Linux firmware at binary redistributable pipe t-a/etc/portage/package.license. And there it is. And what this does is this tells Portage to accept the binary redistributable license when installing specifically this Linux firmware package. And now that that's added, we can go ahead and type emerge-q syskernel /Linux-firmware. And I will see you in a minute. And that is complete. So just like in the Arch installation, if you do have a new-ish sound card, we are going to want to install the soft firmware package. So in order to do that, let's type emerge-ask sysfirmware/soft firmware. And we will do a yes on that. And I like the -q flag because it doesn't show all this screen bloat, and it allows me to only see the important messages. Alright, that soft firmware package is installed. We'll clear the terminal. And now to install the kernel. The beauty of Gentoo is that we can configure our kernel exactly as we want, which can very much optimize our system. But in this video, it wouldn't make sense for me to configure the kernel to my custom specs, because none of you will have the same specs as me. So I'm just going to install a binary kernel. And if you're interested in customizing your kernel, I will leave a link to the kernel customization wiki below the subscribe button of this video. So first we need to add dracut as a use flag for install kernel. So what we'll do is we will type echo quote syskernel /install kernel space dracut space grub quote, and we'll put that out into etc portage package.use install kernel. Alright, now that that's set up, we can run emerge-q syskernel /install kernel. Now that that is done, we are ready to install the kernel. Alright, let's type emerge-q syskernel /gentoo-kernel-bin. And this could take a long time, even though it is a binary file. So I'm going to let that rip, and I will see you in a minute. Alright, the kernel is installed. So let's clear that terminal and move on. Alright, next up is to create the Fstab. And if you don't factor time into the equation, this next part is the hardest part of the installation so far. I'm going to do this using labels instead of UUIDs today, but if you are someone who commonly changes the positions of your hard drives, you're going to want to use UUIDs, and I will link a wiki page on how to set that up in the description. So let's jump into that Fstab by typing vim/etc/fstab, and let's go ahead and go to the bottom of this file by typing Shift-G, and we'll type O to enter a new line, and let's just do dev sda1, and that is our boot partition. So we'll type tab/boot/EFI tab vfat is the type, tab defaults for the options, tab once and 0 /2 for the dump and the pass. And for the swap partition, we're gonna do /dev/sda2 tab, and this one is not mounted anywhere, so that'll be none. Tab, and for the type, we're going to type swap tab, and for the options, we will type SW tab, and for the dump and pass, it's going to be 0 /0. Enter, and for the root partition, we'll do dev sda3 tab, and that is on root, so we'll type /tab, and that was an ext4 type, so we'll go ext4 tab, and for this, we'll just do no atime, tab, and we'll go 0 dump and 1 pass. and we'll hit escape. So if you want to, you can just pause the video and copy what I've written down here, and it should work if you've followed the instructions thus far for your system. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and close this file by doing :WQ to write quit, and we are good to move on to the hostname. So the next part involves setting up the network, and the first step of that is to set the hostname. So we'll go ahead and type vim/etsy/conf.d/hostname, and I'm going to teach you a Vim trick here. So just literally press JFL, now type CIW, and we're going to type your hostname. So mine is going to be Gentoo-BTW, because I'm on Gentoo, by the way, and I'll hit escape, :WQ to save and quit that file. And I will clear that terminal. Alright, one more section we need to change is vim etsy hosts. And we're going to go down to this line here where it says 127.0.0.1 localhost. And we're going to copy this line by pressing Shift-V, Y-P. And we'll go up to this line by pressing up. And we'll go FL again to get to this localhost. And we'll do the same thing, CIW, and we'll type Gentoo-by the way. Escape, :WQ to write and quit that file, and we are ready to move on to the network. So clear that, and we need to install DHCPCD as well as netifrc. So we will go ahead and type emerge-q netmisc DHCPCD and hit enter. Okay, now we'll do emerge-q -- no replace netmisc netifrc. Alright, we are ready to add our network interface to our confd net file, and in order to do that, we need to go ahead and type ifconfig to get the name of our network interface. So my network interface is enp0s3, so what I'll do is I'll type vim/etsy/conf.d/net, and we need to add this string, so type I to get into insert mode, and type config _, and I'm going to do enp0s3, but you'll do whatever the name of your interface was, equals dhcp, and then escape, :WQ to write and quit that file. And part 2 of the DHCP puzzle is to automatically start networking at boot. We need to tinker a little bit. So let's go ahead and cd into etsy/init.d. And we will do ln-s space net.lo space net dot, and here's where you're going to type your interface. I'm going to do enp0s3. And I will do rc-update add net dot, again, you're going to use your interface name. I'm going to type enp0s3 default. Alright, DHCP has been added, and we are good to move on to creating users. And let's just type password, and let's make a password here. So I'm going to do 1234 and 1234, and that looks like it's pretty good, pretty secure, as you can see by that prompt. And just like the Arch video, I will do user add -m-g users wheel. I'm also going to throw myself in the audio and video groups -s/bin bash Tony. And you can ignore that mailbox error. Let's set the password for Tony. That's going to be 1234 and 1234 again. All right. So we're actually very much close to being done here. Let's go ahead and clear that terminal. And we do want to install sudo. So to do that, let's emerge-q sudo. All right, sudo is installed. Clear the terminal. Let's go ahead and do editor equals vim vi sudo. And we can scroll down and we can uncomment the iconic line wheel all equals all. So to uncomment that, just hit X twice, and then we can do :WQ to write and quit that file, to clear that terminal. And we're pretty much ready to go here. We just need to do one more thing. So let's just cd to get back to the home directory, and we need to configure the bootloader. So to install GRUB with the UEFI system, there's a couple ways to skin that cat, and one is to add this line to the make.conf file. So let's go ahead and do that by typing echo quote grub_platforms equals double quote, EFI-64, double quote, single quote, and we're going to output that to etc portage make.conf. And we'll clear that. With that setting, we can go ahead and run emerge-q sysboot grub, and just for good measure, let's go ahead and emerge EFI boot mgr, and let's sneak in a neofetch and let that rip. And there are 11 packages here, so I will see you in a minute. Alright, grub is installed, so we can go ahead and clear the terminal. And if you are on a virtual machine like me, you may have to run this command, mount-t EFI varfs EFI varfs /sys /firmware /EFI EFI vars, and it is finally time to install grub. So go ahead and type grub-install EFI directory equals boot /EFI. And we need to make the config file, so let's go ahead and type grub-mkconfig-o /boot/grub/grub.cfg. And once again, we can go ahead and ignore that disable OS prober error because we are not dual booting. But yeah, grub is installed. It's very important that you see this found initrd image and found Linux image, otherwise your system may not boot. So it's time to unmount all of our drives and reboot the system. So we can type exit to get out of chroot, and let's cd to get to the home directory, and we can just do a umount-r/mnt/gentoo and lsblk. Looks like we're fully unmounted and ready to reboot. So we can finally just type reboot. Beautiful. We see grub here, so looks like we're almost done with this installation. Alright, there we are, Gentoo, by the way, login. So let's type in our username and our 1234 password, and we are logged into Gentoo. Before we install our graphical environment, we're going to need to add 2 use flags so that our package manager knows to compile these programs correctly. So go ahead and do the following. Touch etc portage package.use/xorg sudo echo sysauth pambase elogin-d. We're going to pipe that into sudo t-a etc portage package.use/xorg and sudo echo media libs libglvnd-x. Pipe that into sudo t-a etc portage package.use/xorg. While we're doing that, let's go ahead and add one more use flag to that file by typing sudo echo netwireless/wpa supplicant debus, and we will pipe that into sudo t-a etc portage package.use/xorg. Alright, so we don't have a graphic environment yet, so we aren't technically done with the install yet. So let's run this emerge script to install the following packages. So we'll run sudo emerge --ask-q xorg server x11 apps xinit x11 apps xrandr x11 drivers xf86-video-visa elogin-d dev-vcs/git. And we're going to hit yes for this. Looks like we got 96 packages to compile, so I will see you in a bit. Alright, looks like that finished, so we can go ahead and clear the terminal. Okay, we are finally ready to install our window manager and terminal. So let's go ahead and type sudo emerge-q dwm, which is a very minimal dynamic window manager, and st, which is a very minimal simple terminal. Set our password 1234, and we are ready to let that rip. Alright, that is complete, so let's clear the terminal. The last thing we need to do before jumping into our desktop manager is set up our xinit script. And this is going to be a very minimal setup today, so we can just make our xinit file by typing touch.xinitrc and we will echo quote exec dwm, and we're going to output that into our Xinit RC file. And a few more things we need to install before we're able to boot into our environment is Debus and NetworkManager. So we'll do sudo emerge -q sysapps debus and NetworkManager. And that looks like that's going to be 30 packages, so I will see you in a minute. Alright, let's go ahead and clear that terminal. And let's enable NetworkManager on startup by typing sudo rc update add NetworkManager, and that's a capital N and a capital M default. Get a password. Alright, there you see it says Service Network Manager has been added to the run level. So with that, we can do one more sudo reboot. And we're loading back into Gentoo. This time with Network Manager enabled. And we can log in. And we are at the final step here of logging into Gentoo, and all we need to do is type start X. And there we go. Blazingly fast startup here, and there's DWM. Perfect. So we can open a terminal with Alt-Shift-Enter, and it wouldn't be a complete installation guide without running an obligatory Neofetch.